The emergency klaxons screamed across the Galactic Council's flagship as Admiral Zexthar watched the impossible unfold on his tactical display. The massive crimson shape cutting through space toward the human colony of New Terra wasn't just any ship. It was a Kitharan dreadnought, piloted by Vexmore the Destroyer, the most feared creature in known space. "Sir, the human colony has been broadcasting distress signals for the past hour," reported Lieutenant Quinn, her tentacles trembling as she manipulated the communication console. "They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Zexthar's 4 eyes focused grimly on the display. Vexmore hadn't been seen for 3 standard years, not since the massacre at the Centauri mining station, where he'd incinerated 12,000 beings without warning. The creature was a living nightmare, a Kitharan war dragon standing nearly 4 meters tall, with scales harder than military-grade armor and breath that could melt through starship hulls. His reputation for cruelty was legendary across 17 star systems. "How long until we reach New Terra?" Zexthar asked, though he already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 47 minutes, sir, but Vexmore's ship will arrive in 12. The bridge fell silent, except for the persistent wailing of alarms. Every officer present understood the mathematics of destruction. Vexmore had never left survivors. The human colony, established only 2 years ago with a population of 8,000, would be nothing but ash and memory by the time the Council fleet arrived. "Sir," Quinn's voice cracked slightly, "the humans, they're not evacuating. Long-range sensors show minimal movement from the colony. It's almost like they're waiting." Zexthar found this puzzling. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their strategic thinking and survival instincts. They'd earned their place in the Galactic Council through remarkable military victories and innovative technologies. Yet now, faced with certain annihilation, they seemed to be making no effort to flee. "Perhaps their ships are damaged," suggested Commander Rix from the weapons station. "Or maybe they're planning some kind of last stand." The Admiral considered this. Humans were indeed capable of surprising tactical maneuvers, but what could they possibly do against Vexmore? The dragon's personal shields could deflect planetary defense cannons, and his ship carried enough firepower to glass an entire continent. If the humans were planning resistance, it would be nothing more than a gesture of defiance before inevitable death. On New Terra, the reality was far different than what the Council officers imagined. The colony's defense coordinator, Captain Sarah Mitchell, stood in the Central Command Center watching the approaching dreadnought with surprising calm. Around her, the usual chaos of emergency evacuation was notably absent. Instead, colonists moved with purposeful determination, but not toward escape pods or shuttles. "Captain, Vexmore's ship will be in weapons range in 8 minutes, reported Sergeant Barnes, his voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. "The evacuation transports won't arrive for another hour." Sarah nodded. Her attention focused on a small figure sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby. 7-year-old Emma Chen was completely absorbed in drawing with her colored pencils, apparently oblivious to the approaching danger. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around her face as she worked, tongue slightly poking out in concentration. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, "remember what we talked about? When the big ship lands, you know what to do, right?" The little girl looked up with bright brown eyes and smiled. "Uh-huh. I go say hello to the dragon and make friends. Dragons aren't really scary once you get to know them, just like the stories Daddy reads me." Some of the nearby officers exchanged worried glances, but Sarah simply smiled back. The plan they'd devised was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. 3 weeks ago, Emma had been playing near the colony's xenobiology research station when a wounded Kitharan scout had crash-landed nearby. While the adults prepared for potential conflict, Emma had simply walked up to the injured alien and offered him her juice box. The scout, barely conscious and expecting death, had been so stunned by this gesture that he'd remained peaceful long enough for the colonists to provide medical aid. During his recovery, Emma had visited daily, bringing drawings and asking endless questions about his home world. The gruff warrior had found himself enchanted by her innocent curiosity and complete lack of fear. Before departing, the scout had shared something crucial. Kitharans, despite their fearsome reputation, held deep cultural reverence for what they called pure spirits, beings who approached the world without malice or deception. Such encounters were considered sacred, and to harm a pure spirit brought terrible dishonor upon a warrior's entire bloodline. "The emergency broadcast is ready, Captain," Barnes announced. "Should we transmit?" Sarah glanced once more at Emma, who had returned to her drawing. The child was sketching what looked like a large dragon with friendly eyes, surrounded by flowers. It was a gamble of astronomical proportions, betting everything on the innocence of one small human child and the honor codes of a species known for its ruthlessness. "Send it," Sarah commanded. Across the void of space, Vexmore the Destroyer sat in the command throne of his dreadnought, savoring the familiar anticipation of conquest. His massive form, covered in deep red scales that seemed to absorb light, dominated the bridge. Twin rows of razor-sharp teeth gleamed as he considered the various methods of destruction he might employ against the human colony below. "Lord Vexmore," his lieutenant, a smaller but equally vicious Kitharan named Grix, approached with visible excitement. "The humans are transmitting on all frequencies. Shall I silence their communications?" "Let them beg," Vexmore rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "I find their desperation amusing." But as the transmission filled the bridge, both dragons fell silent in confusion. Instead of pleas for mercy or desperate bargaining, they heard a clear, sweet voice singing a simple children's song about friendship and kindness. The voice belonged to someone very young, completely unafraid, and utterly innocent. Vexmore's massive head tilted as he listened to the child's song echoing through his warship. For the first time in decades, the destroyer felt something other than rage or hunger for battle. It was a sensation so foreign that he initially couldn't identify it. "My lord," Grix whispered uncertainly, "shall we begin the bombardment?" The great dragon remained silent, his burning yellow eyes fixed on the speakers as the little voice continued its gentle melody. Somewhere deep in his ancient memory, a nearly forgotten piece of Kitharan wisdom stirred to life. On the colony below, Emma finished her song and looked up at the massive ship now visible in the sky above them. "Mommy," she called to Dr. Linda Chen, who was standing nervously nearby. "The dragon's here! Can I go say hello now?" The ship descended through the atmosphere like a mountain of dark metal and malevolent design. Its landing created tremors that shook buildings throughout the colony. Steam hissed from cooling vents as the massive vessel settled onto the designated landing pad, a space usually reserved for cargo freighters, now occupied by an instrument of destruction. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The entire colony held its breath, waiting to see if their desperate plan would work, or if they had just made their final mistake. Then, with a deep grinding sound that echoed across the settlement, a massive door opened in the side of the dreadnought. Vexmore the Destroyer emerged, his 4-meter frame casting a shadow that seemed to darken the very air around him. His scales caught the light of New Terra's twin suns, creating an almost hypnotic display of crimson and gold. Behind him came his crew, equally terrifying Kitharan warriors who had participated in countless raids and battles. Each one was armed with weapons capable of reducing a building to rubble, and their collective presence made the air itself seem to thicken with menace. The colonists watched from their positions throughout the settlement, many holding their breath as the most dangerous predator in known space surveyed his new hunting ground. Vexmore's massive head turned slowly, taking in the sight of the human colony with what appeared to be calculating hunger. Then, from the direction of the main plaza, came the sound of small footsteps running across metal decking. Emma Chen appeared around the corner of a supply building, her colorful dress bright against the utilitarian gray of the colony structures. In her small hands, she carried her drawing pad and a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from the colony's botanical garden. Every weapon on the landing pad turned toward the approaching child, but she seemed completely unaware of the danger. Her face was bright with excitement, as if she were running toward a playground rather than toward creatures capable of incinerating her with a single breath. "Hello, Mr. Dragon," she called out cheerfully as she slowed to a walk, apparently remembering her manners. "I'm Emma. I made you a picture." The entire landing pad fell into an eerie silence as Emma approached the massive war dragons. Vexmore's burning yellow eyes fixed upon the tiny human child, and for the first time in his 3-century lifespan, the destroyer found himself completely uncertain of how to respond. The little girl stopped a few meters away from the towering Catharan leader and looked up at him with bright, curious eyes. She showed no fear, no hesitation, only the pure wonder of a child meeting something new and exciting. "Wow, you're even bigger than I thought you'd be," Emma exclaimed, craning her neck to see Vexmore's full height. "Are you really 400 years old? That must mean you've seen so many cool things. I'm only 7, so I haven't seen very much yet, but I like making friends with everyone I meet." Behind Vexmore, his crew of hardened warriors exchanged bewildered glances. Lieutenant Grix's clawed hand hovered uncertainly over his weapon, waiting for orders that didn't come. None of them had ever encountered anything like this before. Their victims typically screamed, begged, or attempted to flee. This small human was treating their arrival like a social visit. Vexmore slowly lowered his massive head until he was closer to Emma's level, though he still towered above her like a living mountain. His breath, which could incinerate steel, washed over her in warm puffs that made her hair flutter slightly. She giggled at the sensation. "You are not afraid, little one?" Vexmore's voice rumbled like distant thunder, each word carefully measured. In all his years of conquest and destruction, no being had ever approached him with such openness. "Afraid? Of you?" Emma tilted her head in confusion. "Why would I be afraid? You're a dragon. Dragons are the coolest creatures in the whole universe. My daddy reads me stories about them all the time. Most people think dragons are scary because they don't understand that dragons are just really good at protecting things they care about." The ancient war dragon felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced since his youth, before the wars had hardened his heart into stone. This child spoke of dragons with reverence and understanding, not fear and hatred. "I brought you a present," Emma announced, holding up her drawing pad. She carefully tore off the top sheet and offered it to Vexmore. "I drew this picture of you, but I made you look happy instead of angry, because I bet you'd be really nice if you weren't always having to fight people." The drawing showed a large red dragon sitting peacefully in a field of flowers, with a small human figure offering the dragon a crown made of daisies. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Friends Forever," decorated with hearts and stars. Vexmore stared at the drawing for a long moment. In 3 centuries of existence, no one had ever depicted him as anything other than a monster to be feared. This child had imagined him as something noble, something worthy of friendship and kindness. "The other dragons back home," Emma continued conversationally, "they probably don't get to see flowers very often, do they? I bet your home planet is all cold and rocky. That must be kind of sad." She held up the small bouquet of wildflowers she'd brought. "These are from our garden. They smell really nice and they're pretty colors. Would you like to smell them?" Before anyone could react, Emma stepped forward and stretched up on her tiptoes, holding the flowers toward Vexmore's massive snout. The destroyer's crew tensed, hands moving instinctively toward weapons, certain their leader would incinerate this presumptuous child for daring to approach so closely. Instead, Vexmore carefully lowered his head further, allowing his sensitive nostrils to catch the delicate scent of the earth-descended blooms. The fragrance was unlike anything in his experience, sweet, gentle, and completely alien to a lifetime spent breathing the smoke of burning worlds. "They're lovely," he admitted quietly, his voice losing some of its threatening rumble. "We have no such things on Kythera Prime." "That's okay," Emma said brightly. "I can teach your people how to grow them. Plants are really easy once you know the trick. You just have to give them water and sunshine and tell them nice things so they know they're wanted." The absurdity of this statement, a 7-year-old human offering to teach the galaxy's most feared species about gardening, should have been laughable. Instead, Vexmore found himself considering the possibilities with genuine interest. "Little one," he said carefully, "do you know who I am? Do you understand what I have done to earn my reputation among the stars?" Emma nodded seriously. "Captain Mitchell told me you're called the Destroyer, and that lots of people are scared of you because you've had to fight in wars and do things that made you sad inside. But I think maybe you're tired of being angry all the time. And you came here because you wanted to find out what it feels like to have friends instead of enemies." The massive dragon blinked slowly, processing these words. This child had somehow seen through centuries of carefully cultivated terror to glimpse something he'd thought was long dead, the possibility of peace, of purpose beyond destruction. "You are very wise for one so young," Vexmore murmured, "but I am a creature of war. I know no other existence." "That's okay," Emma replied with the unshakable confidence of childhood. "Nobody starts out knowing how to be friends. I had to learn too. The first step is really easy. You just have to want to try." Around the landing pad, the colonists watched in amazement as their desperate gamble appeared to be working. Even the most optimistic among them had hardly dared hope for such a peaceful interaction. Captain Mitchell monitored the situation from the command center, ready to intervene if necessary, but increasingly convinced that intervention would be both unnecessary and unwelcome. "Emma," Dr. Chen's voice called softly from nearby. "Perhaps Mr. Vexmore would like to see our garden? We have lots of different flowers there." The little girl clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, yes. Would you like a tour? We have roses and sunflowers and these really cool purple ones that smell like vanilla. And there's a pond where we keep fish, but they're friendly fish, not the kind that try to eat each other." Vexmore straightened to his full height, his crew watching in stunned silence as their leader, the scourge of 17 star systems, considered a walking tour of a human flower garden as if it were a military briefing of the highest importance. "I would be honored to see your garden," he said formally, the ancient words of diplomatic courtesy feeling strange on his tongue after so many years of threats and ultimatums. As they began walking toward the botanical section of the colony, Emma chattering happily about the different plants they would see, Lieutenant Grix approached his commander with obvious bewilderment. "My lord," he whispered urgently, "the crew is confused. Are we not here to claim this territory for the Empire?" Vexmore paused in his slow stride, looking down at the small human child who was now explaining the life cycle of butterflies with animated gestures. For the first time in decades, the idea of conquest seemed not just unnecessary, but almost blasphemous. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "have you ever encountered a pure spirit?" Grix's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Pure spirits were legendary among the Kytheran people, beings of such innocence and goodness that to harm them was considered the gravest possible sin against the natural order. Most Kytherans believed them to be myths, stories told to younglings to teach them about honor and virtue. My lord, surely you don't mean— Look at her, Grix, Vexmore commanded, gesturing toward Emma, who was now picking additional flowers to create a larger bouquet for her new friend. Tell me what you see. The lieutenant observed the child carefully, noting her complete absence of fear, the genuine joy in her expression, the way she moved through the world with absolute trust and kindness. According to Kitharan tradition, pure spirits radiated an almost visible aura of innocence that could be recognized by any warrior with sufficient spiritual awareness. By the ancient codes, Grix breathed, she truly is one of the blessed ones. Indeed, Vexmore rumbled. And what does our law say about those who would harm a pure spirit? That they and their entire bloodline will know only suffering until the stars themselves grow cold, Grix recited automatically. But, my lord, she is human. Surely the ancient laws do not apply to alien species. Vexmore watched as Emma carefully arranged her flowers, her small face scrunched in concentration as she tried to create the most beautiful bouquet possible for her new dragon friend. The sight stirred something profound in his ancient heart. The codes speak of pure spirits, Lieutenant, not pure Kitharan spirits. If we have learned anything from our expansion into the galaxy, it is that wisdom and goodness can take many forms among many peoples. As they resumed walking, Emma looked up at Vexmore with sparkling eyes. Mr. Dragon, do you have any little dragons back home? I bet they'd love to play games and learn about flowers, too. We do have younglings, Vexmore admitted, though they are taught from hatching to be warriors as I was. That sounds kind of lonely, Emma said thoughtfully. Don't they ever get to just play and have fun? Playing is really important for growing up happy. The destroyer considered this observation. Kitharan society was indeed harsh, with younglings beginning combat training almost from the moment they could walk. He had never questioned this tradition, but seeing the joy and wonder in this human child made him wonder what his own people might become if they were allowed to experience such innocence. Perhaps, he said slowly, there are different ways to grow strong. Emma beamed at him. Exactly. Being strong doesn't always mean being good at fighting. Sometimes being strong means being brave enough to make friends with someone who seems scary, or kind enough to share your toys with someone who doesn't have any. As they approached the botanical garden, Vexmore found himself genuinely curious about the varieties of plant life the humans had cultivated. The garden was a riot of color and fragrance, with carefully tended beds of flowers from dozens of different worlds, all somehow made to thrive in New Terra's unique environment. This is my favorite spot in the whole colony, Emma announced, spreading her arms wide to encompass the entire garden. When I'm here, I feel like everything in the universe is connected, and we're all just different kinds of flowers in the same big garden. The ancient warrior stared at this small human child, who spoke of universal connection with the same casual certainty that he had once spoken of conquest and destruction. In her simple words, he heard echoes of philosophical concepts that Kitharan scholars had debated for millennia. Tell me, little philosopher, Vexmore said gently, what do you think the purpose of existence is? Emma considered this question with the same serious attention she had given to arranging flowers. I think we're here to make things better for each other, she said finally. Like, maybe the universe is really big and sometimes scary, but if everyone just tries to be kind and help out, then all the scary parts become less scary, and all the beautiful parts become even more beautiful. Vexmore felt something crack deep in his chest, not the fracture of breaking, but the crack of something long frozen finally beginning to thaw. This child had just expressed, with perfect simplicity, what the greatest Kitharan philosophers had struggled to articulate across centuries of debate. As they wandered through the garden, Emma maintained a constant stream of cheerful chatter, pointing out different flowers and explaining their properties with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. Vexmore found himself genuinely fascinated by her innocent observations, many of which contained surprising depth. "These ones are called forget-me-nots," Emma said, kneeling beside a patch of tiny blue flowers. "They're really small, but they're super important because they help people remember that even little things can be beautiful and special. Sometimes grown-ups forget that, because they're always thinking about big, complicated stuff." The massive dragon carefully knelt beside her, his armored joints creaking slightly. Up close. The delicate flowers were indeed remarkable. Their petals formed perfect spirals of blue that seemed to capture and reflect the light of New Terra's twin suns. "On my home world," Vexmore said quietly, "we measure worth by size and strength. These flowers would be considered insignificant." "That's kind of sad," Emma replied, gently touching one of the tiny blooms. "I think your people might feel happier if they learned to notice the small, beautiful things, too. Maybe they just need someone to show them how." "And who might undertake such a task?" Vexmore asked, though he suspected he already knew her answer. "Well," Emma said with the matter-of-fact tone children use when stating the obvious, "we could do it together. You could teach me about being brave and strong like dragons are supposed to be. And I could teach you about finding pretty things and making friends. Then we could visit your planet and show everyone else." The simplicity of this proposal was staggering. This 7-year-old human was casually suggesting what amounted to a complete cultural revolution for one of the galaxy's most militaristic species, as if it were no more complicated than organizing a playdate. "Little one," Vexmore said carefully, "my people have been warriors for thousands of years. Change does not come easily to us." "That's okay," Emma said brightly. "My mommy says that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest steps, and making friends is always a good first step, no matter who you are." As if to demonstrate this principle, she reached up and gently placed her small hand on one of the large scales on Vexmore's forearm. The destroyer tensed slightly at the unexpected contact. In his centuries of existence, touch had always meant either violence or challenge. But Emma's touch was different, warm, innocent, and completely trusting. "Your scales are really pretty," she observed. "They look like rubies, but warmer. I bet they feel safe and strong to hide behind when you're scared." "Dragons do not experience fear," Vexmore replied automatically, reciting the fundamental creed of his species. Emma tilted her head thoughtfully. "Really? That seems impossible. Everyone gets scared sometimes. I get scared during thunderstorms, and my daddy gets scared when he has to give speeches, and my mommy gets scared when she thinks about all the bad things that could happen in space." "Being scared isn't bad. It just means you care about something enough to worry about losing it." Once again, this child had managed to reframe a concept he had never questioned, presenting fear not as weakness, but as evidence of love and attachment. The implications were profound and disturbing to everything he had been taught about strength and invulnerability. "What do you think I might fear, little philosopher?" he asked, curious to hear her perspective. Emma considered this seriously. "Maybe you're afraid that if you stop being angry and scary, people won't respect you anymore. Or maybe you're afraid that if you let yourself care about things, they might get taken away. Those are pretty common scared feelings for grown-ups who have important jobs." The accuracy of her assessment was breathtaking. Vexmore stared down at this small human who had somehow seen directly into the heart of conflicts he had been wrestling with for decades without even realizing it. "You are remarkably perceptive," he admitted. "How does one so young understand such complex emotions?" "I don't know if they're really that complex," Emma replied. "I think maybe grown-ups just make them complicated because they forget how to use simple words for feelings. Like instead of saying, 'I'm scared you won't like me,' they do all sorts of angry things to try to make people pay attention to them." Lieutenant Grix, who had been following at a respectful distance, finally approached his commander. "My lord, the Council fleet will arrive within the hour. We should decide our course of action." Vexmore looked down at Emma, who was now attempting to weave some of the smaller flowers into a chain. Her fingers were still learning the complex motions, but she persevered with determined concentration. "What course would you recommend, little one?" he asked her. Emma looked up from her flower chain, considering the question with the same seriousness she applied to all problems. "Well, if the Council ships are coming because they're worried about everyone being safe, maybe we should show them that everyone is safe and happy. Sometimes when grown-ups are worried, they feel better if they can see with their own eyes that everything is okay. And how would you suggest we demonstrate this?" "We could have a party!" Emma exclaimed, her face lighting up with excitement. "My mommy makes really good cookies, and we could show them the garden. And you could meet all the other people in the colony. When people have fun together, they usually stop being scared of each other." The concept of Vexmore the Destroyer attending a community social gathering was so absurd that even his battle-hardened crew had to suppress reactions of amazement. Yet the more he considered it, the more sensible Emma's suggestion seemed. Actions, after all, spoke louder than words. And what action could more clearly demonstrate peaceful intent than participation in a celebration? "Very well," Vexmore announced, his deep voice carrying across the garden. "We shall attend your party. But first, I believe you mentioned something about teaching my crew to grow flowers." Emma clapped her hands together in delight. "Yes, everyone should know how to grow things. It makes you feel connected to life in a special way." She turned toward the other Kitharan warriors, who had been standing awkwardly at the garden's edge, clearly uncertain how to process the morning's events. "Hi, everyone," she called cheerfully. "Do you want to learn about plants? It's really fun, and you get to put your hands in dirt, which is kind of gross but also kind of satisfying." The hardened warriors looked to their commander for guidance. Vexmore nodded slowly, and one by one, the most feared military unit in known space began to approach a 7-year-old human for gardening lessons. What followed was perhaps the most surreal hour in galactic history. Emma, with the patient enthusiasm of a born teacher, guided Kitharan warriors through the basics of soil preparation, seed planting, and watering techniques. The sight of creatures bred for war, carefully tending tiny seedlings with their massive claws, was both touching and absurd. "The most important thing," Emma explained seriously to a particularly intimidating warrior named Crex, "is to be gentle but confident. Plants can tell if you're nervous, so you have to believe in them growing big and strong." Crex, who had personally led the assault on 3 different star systems, found himself completely absorbed in the task of creating the perfect environment for a small sunflower seed. "Like this, young teacher?" he asked, his gravelly voice unusually soft. "Perfect," Emma praised. "You're a natural. I think you have magic plant hands." By the time the Galactic Council fleet arrived, they found a scene that defied all their worst-case scenario planning. Instead of a smoldering ruin, New Terra appeared to be hosting some kind of cultural festival. The landing pad that should have been littered with debris and bodies instead bustled with activity as humans and Kitharans worked together to set up tables laden with food and decorations made from the colony's flowers. Admiral Zexathar materialized on the surface with a full diplomatic security detail, weapons ready for immediate deployment. What he found instead was Vexmore the Destroyer, sitting cross-legged on the ground, carefully helping a small human child braid flowers into decorative chains, while she explained the symbolic meaning of different color combinations. "Admiral!" Captain Mitchell called out, approaching with obvious relief. "Perfect timing." Emma was just about to show Vexmore how to make friendship bracelets. The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession as he tried to process this information. "Captain Mitchell, are you saying that the situation is Under control? More than under control, Sarah replied with a grin. I think we might have just witnessed the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. Emma looked up from her flower braiding and noticed the new arrivals. Oh, hello. Are you here for the party, too? We have lots of food, and Vexmore's been telling me the most amazing stories about different planets he's visited. Did you know that there's a world where it rains crystals? Admiral Zexathar found himself the object of Emma's bright, expectant gaze. This small human, who should have been traumatized or worse, was treating the arrival of a council rescue fleet as simply more guests for her impromptu celebration. Young lady, he said carefully, do you understand what has happened here today? Uh-huh, Emma nodded enthusiastically. I made a new friend. His name is Vexmore, and he's really smart and knows lots of interesting things. He was feeling kind of lonely because everyone always expected him to be angry all the time, but now he knows that he can choose to be different if he wants to. She turned to Vexmore, who was examining his completed flower bracelet with what could only be described as wonder. You are different now, right? You don't have to be the destroyer anymore if you don't want to be. The massive dragon looked down at the delicate chain of flowers adorning his forearm, a symbol of peace and friendship that would have been unthinkable just hours before. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of decision that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. You are correct, little teacher. I believe I would prefer to be known simply as Vexmore, friend to humans and cultivator of gardens. Emma beamed with pride and suddenly stepped forward. Before anyone could react, she stood on her tiptoes and placed a gentle kiss on the tip of Vexmore's massive snout, exactly the way she might kiss a beloved pet or stuffed animal goodnight. The entire gathering fell silent. In Catharan culture, such an intimate gesture was reserved for family members and carried profound meaning about trust, acceptance, and love. No non-Catharan had ever been granted such honor, and no warrior of Vexmore's status had received it since his own childhood centuries ago. Vexmore's eyes closed as he felt something fundamental shift within his ancient heart. When he opened them again, they held a warmth that had been absent for so long he had forgotten it was possible. Thank you, little one, he whispered. You have given me a gift beyond price. Emma giggled. That's what friends do. They give each other the best presents they can think of. Admiral Zexthar watched this exchange with growing amazement. In a single morning, this small human child had accomplished what centuries of diplomacy, warfare, and negotiation had failed to achieve. She had transformed the galaxy's most feared predator into an ally through nothing more than innocence, kindness, and an unshakable belief in the fundamental goodness of all beings. As the afternoon progressed, the party grew to include crew members from the council ships, colonists, and Catharan warriors, all mingling together in unprecedented harmony. Emma moved among them all like a tiny ambassador, introducing everyone to everyone else, and ensuring that no one felt left out. The sight of hardened space marines sharing cookies with dragon warriors while a 7-year-old girl explained the proper technique for making flower crowns would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Artists would paint the scene, poets would write verses about it, and diplomats would study it for generations to come. But for Emma, it was simply a very good day where she had made new friends and helped someone discover that they could choose to be happy instead of angry. As New Terra's twin suns began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Vexmore found Emma sitting quietly in the garden, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Are you tired, little teacher?" he asked gently, settling beside her with the careful grace he had learned throughout their day together. "A little," Emma admitted, "but it's the good kind of tired you get after doing something really important." She looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Vexmore, do you think the other dragons will want to learn about flowers too?" I believe, the former destroyer said thoughtfully, that they will be very curious about the small human who taught their greatest warrior to find beauty in tiny things. Emma smiled and leaned against his warm scales, completely trusting and utterly content. I can't wait to meet them. I bet they all have really interesting stories, just like you do. As the stars grew brighter above New Terra, Vexmore carefully draped one massive wing over the sleepy child, protecting her from the evening chill. Around them, the garden rustled softly in the night breeze, filled with the flowers that had helped bridge two very different species through the simple power of an innocent heart. In the years that would follow, the story of Emma and Vexmore would spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring countless other meetings between former enemies. The Kithaeron Empire would indeed transform, becoming known not as conquerors, but as the guardians of interstellar botanical gardens that flourished on 1,000 worlds. And on each of those worlds, there would be a small plaque with Emma's simple words. Everyone deserves to have friends, and everyone deserves to know how beautiful the universe can be. The little human girl who had planted a kiss on the nose of the deadliest alien dragon had done far more than make a single friend. She had planted the seeds of peace that would bloom across the stars for generations to come.